fill. So when you deal with a vector graphic, rather than something being built out of pixels, individual pixels, as such, where there's all these smaller units with different colors, instead you have one vector, whatever shape it is. That shape could be, or we call it a vector path, vector shape, whatever term you want to use. And that shape could be a square or a circle or a triangle or a star shape. It wouldn't cross over itself like that, but you know what I mean. Boom, 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 boom. Look at that awesome star shape there. But anyway, whatever it is, so the way you should think about this is imagine I have some paper and I have, some scissors and I were to cut, one of these shapes like a circle or a square or a star shape out of like construction paper or like wrapping paper or origami paper. That's kind of what you should think of when we think about fill and stroke. So, when you have a vector shape, that has a fill, which is the interior. The interior can be a solid color. It can also be what we call a gradient, which is a blend between two or more colors, or it could be a tileable design or pattern. Okay. The stroke is this thing that goes around the contours of the perimeter of the shape. Okay. This is a pretty common thing that you're going to see from all vector programs, not just Figma. So even, Adobe Illustrator, Inkscape, other programs that are vector-based would also have this. All right, so I'm going to go back to my files and let's open up exercise 7. So I'm going to click here and to play around with fill, I'm going to go down to where it says fill. Fill is the interior color. It defaults usually in Figma to kind of like this medium gray. I'm going to click on that and you can see that I get a color picker here so I can choose anywhere from red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet. I can choose some sort of color like this. Okay. And you can see it gives me a new fill color. Another way to do this is when I click, I'm going to go to the top here and I get a couple of options. One that says solid, one that says gradient, one that says pattern, image, and video. I don't think we're not going to do video, but I'm going to click where it says gradient. And a gradient is a blend between two or more colors. You might notice how I'm going from this sort of medium purple to this dark purple. These little boxes here are what we refer to as color stops. They are the colors that are part of this gradient. So I'm going to switch my gradient to a yellow, and then let's keep it as a purple. Okay. So you can see more of the gradient, the blend between two colors. Now, as it's blending between the two colors, you can see it's blending between yellow and purple, and it's getting on kind of all the in-between colors here. To change the direction of my gradient, I can click on this line, and that actually changes the direction of my gradient. It was going sort of top to bottom. Now it's going left to right, or I could have it, kind of change directions here. It's going left to right again, something along those lines. Um, if you want to add or subtract stops to a color or to a gradient, you can click right above the line. Oops. Sorry, I lied. You click here on this add gradient stop and it adds one sort of in the middle. And I'm going to click this again and let's maybe make this a green. And you can see how that updates my stop. To remove a stop, you can click on where this little negative here and that would remove it. You have to have a minimum of 2 colors, but you can have as many colors as you want. So this is a linear gradient. Linear gradients go in a line from left to right. Sorry, it goes in a line like left to right or top to bottom, bottom to top, something like that. I'm going to click on this one and we're going to go under fill, gradient, and I'm going to set this to two blues. I'm going to set it to a light blue. I'm going to set this one to a dark blue. like that. And what I'm going to do is here's where I'm going to switch this from linear to gradient, sorry, to radial. Radial means that it goes from in to out. Okay. Think of it, the way I like to think of it is like the way that the sun releases energy. It doesn't release energy in one direction, it releases it in all directions. So what's happening is as this is blending, it's blending in all directions, whatever my gradient is. So it's like blending light to, light to dark, 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 all the way through. I could use this to make my linear more, bigger or smaller. I also have angular. Angular means that your, whatever your when it blends rather than from left to right or in to out, it literally goes like clockwise. So this is my start color and it's blending in like a 40, it's blending in a 360 degrees to go around. So I could click and like literally change that of where it's starting from. Finally, we have a diamond shape. A diamond is kind of like the radial, the difference being that rather than kind of going kind of in a circular type design, it kind of goes in like this kind of diamond type design. Finally, I'm going to use this final option, which is pattern. When you get a pattern, I'm going to select an image actually. We're going to use the image fill here. And we can even use that dinosaur one that we just did. Or I guess it's got to be more of a raster image. Let's use this. So you can see here how it is plugged in to fill in my shape here. So, we can work with solids. We can also work with gradients, and also work with, fill images if you want to create something a little bit more pattern and complex. All right. In addition to fills, there's also stroke, which remember goes around the perimeter. So let's go to exercise 8. Okay. If you highlight a vector, not only will you get the fill, if it does have a stroke, you'll get the stroke. Now, a lot of times in Figma, your objects will defaultly not have a stroke. It might look like this. So to add a stroke to a vector shape in Figma, what you're going to have to do is go to the stroke panel and hit plus, and this would allow you to add a stroke. This is the color of your stroke. So it usually defaults to black, but I can change it to any color I want. As you can see here, this is the weight or the thickness of the stroke measured in pixels. The thicker the stroke, or the higher the weight, the thicker, the thickness of the stroke. Now, when you position the stroke, you can either have it go inside, meaning this is the original shape. This is going interior wise. You can have it go outside, or you could have it kind of do center, which means it's kind of going half inside, half outside. It doesn't really matter for you guys. Usually this is when you're trying to do very precise measurements because when you add a stroke to a vector shape, if it goes outside, it can actually add to the width of it. So this is why, why we might not want to do that. Um, Other options you can do is if you want to apply some additional stroke options, I'm going to go under the options here. Under style, I could switch this to a dash line. A dash line means instead of a solid line, it'd be dash. This is the width of each dash here, measured in pixels. So if you want more dashes, yeah, if I want the dashes to be a little bit smaller, maybe I'd make it like 15. And you can see that they're thinner here or thicker. If you want to go back, I can set this to solid. Another thing we could do is if I go under the advanced options here, is to go under width profile. So at the moment, the width of my stroke is consistent, meaning that what I mean is that it's always the same thickness all the way through. So in other words, like the thickness here is the thickness here is the thickness here. Boom, boom, boom. This is always the same thickness. What we could do to change that to make it a little bit more, little more organic and a little less mechanical is to change the width profile. So the way that this works is that, let's say, I'm going to try to zoom in here. I don't know if it'll work because I'm recording, but this has this kind of triangle shape, as you can kind of see. Let me draw it out here. So what this is really showing is like at the beginning of my shape, we're going to have the thickest part here, which is this. Then as we get further along to about the medium, or the middle, which is that, it's like, not as thick as this. And then as it keeps going, it gets thinner and thinner, which is this last part. So, depending on you can play around with different widths to kind of give your shape different kind of organic kind of feel here. So for this one, it's like, well, when you have this shape like that, it's going to start thin, get thicker, and then go back to thin. Thin to thick, back to thin. Okay. So, that's kind of playing around, not having an equidistant or an equal width, stroke, kind of gives it a little bit more of an organic kind of feel. Last thing you can, if you want to go back to just a regular stroke, you can switch the profile back to the default, which is a solid equidistant stroke line that goes all the way around. Last thing here is we can play around with. I'm going to go under stroke options, under brush, and instead of um, instead of a solid line following our vector path, because at the end of the day, what's happening is we have this path. Okay, it starts here and it goes around like that. And then we're just having this solid individual line follow it. You can actually have kind of this more kind of, organic style or sort of brush stroke here. So it's like, if I were to choose one of these, you can see that it's following the path here. And instead of giving me a solid line, it's giving me more of this like textured, artistic stroke, something like that, which is kind of fun. Once again, if you want to go back to just having it be standard, it's usually go back to basic as opposed to using the brush. An easy way to do that. One more thing I want to talk about is you can technically have a stroke without a fill or a fill without a stroke. If I have a stroke and I want to remove it, you can always remove a stroke by clicking on the minus sign here, and that removes the stroke from your shape. So you can have a fill without a stroke if you want to. If you want to put it back on, just click on the plus sign and then make, changes to things. You can also remove the fill, and the way you would do that is you might notice there's the same minus sign here for the fill. If I click on that, what ends up here is I have now a ring where I have a stroke but no fill to this. Okay. And just like with the stroke, if you want to add a fill back later, you can click plus and then choose between like a solid or a gradient or something along those lines. All right. I want you guys to try that out. That was 7 and 8. Think about how you can take some of those custom shapes we talked about in the last video, circles, squares, stars, and whatnot, and play around with different fill and stroke options. Okay.